Well, look at that. We are going live. Let's see who is here today. I'm so excited to welcome you all. It is going to be such a fun little presentation. Thank you for joining. Thank you for signing up, for telling us all your contact info. I have a lot to share today, and I'm so excited that everyone is here. Wow. Yay, it's happening. Well, my team and I have done a tremendous amount of planning to be here live today. And I am so excited to have you all, which is like really the future of midwifery. Like, you couldn't get more exciting. And yeah, we are going to chat about student life, about the challenges, and we're also going to hopefully answer some questions that you all have. So I am not so great at just randomly talking at the screen. So I think there's a Q&A button. So if you guys have questions, feel free to add that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. So hopefully we can get the right info out to you. But again, technology is not my normal thing. A lot of people, I guess, don't know that I grew up totally off grid, and without running water or electricity. I actually rode my horse to school. So the fact that I have done the entire 20th century technology leap in my lifetime gives me hopefully it gives you all a little patience with me. Alrighty, let's see if I can get this to go. Fingers crossed. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. So here we are. If you have not downloaded the free PDF that goes along with today's chat, you can do that right now. You can go over to our website, midwiferywisdom.com/student download, and you can grab that document. So let's see. Let's see if we can get this party started. Okay, so this document is totally free, and it's just an opportunity for you to follow along with what we're saying. But it actually does come out of a bigger document. So truth in advertising, I have a little upsell for you guys today. My team and I have been working for actually months on this document. So I'm really excited to give you an opportunity to grab one of those at the end of this call. Alrighty, so let's see. Yes, so our Q&A box is open. So if you have any actual questions, you can type them there as we go along. And the whole point of this workshop is to answer questions and be there for you guys. So don't hesitate if you have questions to ask them. Alrighty, so I want to give a little shout out. I see some names that I know and love, and I just want to say I'm on your side. Most people know that my whole job is to midwife the midwife, and that includes the students. So I love helping students be successful, and I'm so excited to chat with you today. So let's go ahead and jump in. So most students come to the beginner stage. There are some midwives who move into midwifery through nursing or through other pathways of education, and they don't start as a beginner, but most do. And so this is normally lasts, in an ideal world, about 18 months. I've seen some people go through it faster, and if you're going through it faster, you're probably not a beginner. So that's one of the topics we're going to chat about. Either way, let's chat about getting an apprenticeship. So how do you get an apprenticeship? There has been some really less than professional ways over the years. Midwives have just talked to neighbors, friends. You have your cousin or your sister or your auntie be your preceptor. But as times have changed and we've become more and more isolated, and actually under more and more persecution from the medical world, at the same time, we're trying to professionalize the whole kit and caboodle. It's important that we start right at the beginning with professionalism. So how do you get an apprenticeship? Well, I want you to know that you can be successful at midwifery apprenticeship, even if the market feels saturated. And I get a lot of calls really regularly with midwives being concerned that there's just not enough preceptors. And I think we do have a bit of a lack of precepting options right now. When Casa de Namacito and Better Birth and Trillium and a few other high volume resources closed in the last couple of years, there has been a lack of options. But that doesn't mean that you can't be successful. So let me give you some points on how I feel like it's best to approach this. So number one, I would say, is treat it like any other application to any other school. You wouldn't be cavalier or laissez-faire about that. You would be really, really focused, and you would really present your best foot. So do the same thing. So what that looks like is sending in a CV, a curriculum vitae. And so it's similar to a resume, but a resume is to get a job and a curriculum vitae is focused on higher education. And so really it makes sense to turn in a CV. And how do you create one? There's models all over the internet. I consult with midwives to help get their application packet really top notch if you want, but you can do this on your own. You just search online, and it really has several subjects. So there's an education subject, there's special qualities or special skills or training side. You go into anything that you've ever published, any honorary positions you've ever held, any volunteers in your community, languages that you speak. It's a very thorough assessment of your educational and sort of social good life. So fill out a CV and then type up a cover letter. And the cover letter to your prospective midwifery preceptor would hopefully be very, very thorough. Something about why you love this pathway, what you want to hopefully do with your education, where you want to practice, how you see yourself, and really how you will be an asset to that midwife's practice. And this isn't particularly hard, so to speak, but it does take a lot of attention and a lot of focus. It takes a lot of passion, and you want that to come through in your writing. So if you've never written a cover letter, there are hundreds and hundreds of recommendations all across the websites. Think of it, instead of thinking of it like a business resume or like a business cover letter, try to think of it more of like an application essay. Like if you were going to apply to college, you would have to write some kind of essay, some kind of way for the selection committee to get to know you as a quality applicant. And I highly recommend that you do this for midwifery too. It might feel like overkill if you're hoping to work with a very, humble midwife who works rurally and doesn't have a super digital presence online. It might feel overkill, but I promise you it will impress them. And more than that, will get you an interview. And that's the way that we move forward. So once you have really understood what midwives are in your area and who you want to work with, then really put together a nice application packet and hopefully request an interview at the end of your letter. And then when you get in to sit with your midwife, your potential preceptor, that's when you get the opportunity to also ask them questions. So come up with some questions that might be really important for you to know if this were going to be a successful relationship. Things like, how many clients do you take a month or a year? Do you ever take time off? How would I learn with you? Is it something I'm supposed to just pick up on my own, or do you have specific teaching methods? So these are all very, beginning questions. There's a lot more you could ask, but make sure that when you schedule that appointment to have a face-to-face, that you make it clear that you have questions too, and that you want to basically interview that preceptor. So hopefully that makes it sense. If there's questions, don't hesitate to use the Q&A box. Yep. So, yeah, there are a lot of workshops out there that maybe aren't so helpful. Lindsay's asking, how do we weed out the BS workshops from the good ones? There seems to be so many. Yeah, I think asking your fellow students if they've taken things and getting their recommendation is the best idea. And, asking around what people think. But you don't necessarily have to take a lot of workshops to get a beginning midwifery apprenticeship. You can just be who you are, and that is sometimes enough. Yeah, so if you're 100% green is a great question that I'm getting right now on the chat. So if you're 100% green, you really have to spend some time thinking, what do I have to offer? And it takes really understanding your role. And the role of a beginning midwifery student is literally observation, to absorb. And you have to see a bunch of things, a bunch of processes, a bunch of prenatals, a bunch of newborn exams, a bunch of births, honestly, before you really understand what your role as an assistant would be. And in an ideal world, hopefully you're watching an awesome assistant doing the role so that you have an idea of what's happening. Hopefully you have a preceptor that can explain to you the different roles in the apprenticeship process. But even if you don't, saying that you're hungry to learn, that you're ready to soak up information, and in exchange for that time and experience, you will support your midwife in XYZ. And so it's really a reciprocal arrangement. We really want to make clear that you have a lot to offer right at the beginning. So this is where writing your CV is so important. What skills do you have from the rest of your life that you can offer? And I don't mean like babysitting skills or anything like that. I don't think that students should be babysitting their apprenticeship's kids or cleaning their car or anything like that. I don't think it should be that reciprocal. But there's a huge bit that there's a huge amount of work that it takes to run a practice. And there are many, many, many small and detail-oriented jobs within the running of the practice that actually would be an incredible help for the midwife to have someone who's doing that. And also, honestly, helps prepare students to become their own entrepreneur, business owner, midwifery practice managers in the future. So I have a list of all of those jobs in the handbook that I'm going to share with you at the end. So yeah, make sure and think about that one. Let's see. Yeah, so Jacqueline's asking, she's been looking for so long, having to leave preceptors because she wasn't getting what she felt she needed. She graduated school and wants to finish births and help moms, but honestly feels a bit duped. Yeah, so you're not wrong there. And we're going to talk about that in the next section because you're not a beginning midwife. You're up there in the junior advanced level. So hold that question one second and I will get to that. So hopefully that process feels like you can just professionalize yourself a little bit more. And usually that preceptor meets you with a higher level of professionalism as well. So what if you're not a beginner? So if you have taken NRP and you understand how to use it, if you have been to more than 10 births as a doula, if you understand what all the equipment that midwives carry is, you're not a beginning midwife, you're a student. You're not a beginning student. So I think the problem that a lot of relationship dynamics have between students and preceptors is that the student keeps calling themselves a beginner. And so then the preceptor does, but really they're not. And so they don't get advanced at the speed that they really should. And they hold themselves back in thinking. And then the preceptor can do nothing but also hold you back because that's where you put yourself. So truly, a beginning midwifery apprenticeship is somebody who has zero experience. They might have taken some classes in school, but they don't understand how a midwife moves in the space. They understand what a midwife is, but they They don't understand the dynamics of labor assessment, of risk assessment, of big picture thinking. They don't understand the liability yet. They don't necessarily understand charting yet. A beginning midwifery student is truly a beginner. So if you're not truly a beginner, if you've graduated a midwifery school, if you've taken CPR and NRP and you understand how to use it, if you're already thinking about what equipment you should be buying, you're not a beginner. So don't paint yourself as such. And it's really important to carry yourself where you are. So a beginner is really, it could take as much as 18 months to be oriented to the whole midwifery process. But if you've already been attending births as a doula, if you've been at a number of your sisters, cousins, or friends' births, if you've been reading every single thing you can get your hand on, if you've had several babies yourself at home, you're not a beginner, actually. So don't paint yourself in that role. Alrighty, so how about tracking your numbers? It's vitally important to track your numbers, and that way you can prove that you're not a beginner. So if you're going through a school process, the school will give you the forms or the software where they expect you to track numbers. If you're going the PEP process, then you'll need to use the PEP paperwork. And unfortunately, NARM is very behind the times and does not have this digitized yet. But you do need to keep track of it. And if you're a CM or a CNM student who's trying to get oriented to community-based birth, you also need to track your numbers. But again, you're not in the midwifery beginning category. So the best way that I recommend is that you really make an effort to do it every single day. And I know this sounds crazy because it is so much to keep track of, but honestly, the more times you flip through your paperwork, the more times you flip through the skills sign-offs, the more you're going to understand what you're actually acquiring. So there's 44 double-sided pages of skills in the NARM PEP process that all need to have 2 signatures each when you first understand the information and then when you've mastered the skill. And you should be asking for a signature basically every day. That 44 pages of content with a signature on every line, double, does take 3 years to finish. And if you don't start from the beginning, you are weighted down by a huge mountain of work at the end. So my best advice for tracking your numbers is to track it every single day. Scan that skills book. What skill did you learn today? What process did you master? What do you know now that you didn't know yesterday? What prenatal did you attend? Write it all down, write it all down, write it all down. I don't think that you have to pester your senior midwife to get a signature every day, but you're responsible for tracking your own numbers and keeping track of it. And if you keep a notebook with you and jot down all the different details that you learned or that you participate in, all the prenatals, then you will be able to transfer that into your NARM book or into your school book when you get home and really move a lot faster. Yeah, so Jen's saying, oh my God, yes, I'm 2.5 years in and have not been great with my paperwork. Yeah, it is exhausting if you don't do it. If you do it at the end, it's totally exhausting. So highly recommend that right from the beginning, you track your numbers and your experiences every single day. Just get in the habit, carry a notebook or open up the notes section on your phone. And, you know, every client should have either a MANA code or a patient code from the EHR system that your midwife is using. So use that code to identify them, because as we learned HIPAA, we realized you can't put any identifying information about patients in your phone or it's a HIPAA violation. So use their identifier right from the beginning and track what experience you learned. And then when you have a significant portion finished, you can bring that paper in front of your senior midwife and they can sign it. Alrighty, so hopefully beginning midwifery makes sense. If you guys have any questions, message them in the question box and we'll go over that. Moving on to the junior or advanced midwifery apprenticeship, and we kind of mush these together. We're calling it 18 months, but it really depends on the volume of your practice that you're working with. It could be that you have a few months of orienting as an assistant, and then you're moving right along into your advanced apprenticeship. But either way, the first 18 months of the beginning is really orientation to birth space, orientation to nomenclature. There's so many different titles and names and acronyms, and it's alphabet soup in midwifery. So you're learning the actual profession, you're learning the anatomy and physiology, you're learning the names, you're learning orientation to midwifery and to birth, and you're becoming an expert in all the stuff in your midwife's bag and practice and the order of prenatals, and it's a real orientation. The junior or the advanced apprenticeship is also 18 months, but it could be really easily split in half. And the way that where this splits in half is junior, which we call lack of confidence, and advanced, where we see confidence. And so some people come out of a beginning midwifery apprenticeship and they only need a few months being seen, understood, and communicated to as an actual assistant, not a beginner, and they will have confidence. They will step into it. They will say, yeah, I'm ready to move forward. For others, it takes quite a while. And this is just personalities. Some, I've been a preceptor for 72 students in my career, a clinical preceptor. Have had 72 students come through my practice in some way or another. Not all of them graduated, but I have worked with many, many, many students. And, it's like, I've seen enough times now that some of them are like, they just need, like, you graduate them and you're like, come on, get out the nest, go fly away, little birdie, you're done, you're good, I trust you. And they just still don't believe you, and they're dealing with so much lack of self-confidence, and their real personality struggle is to even believe in themselves. So that's like really one end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum, and the farthest end of that spectrum, is that they quit because they actually don't believe in themselves. So that's a whole nother category. But then the other end of the spectrum is really those students where you have to like pull back on the reins and be like, no, you're not done yet. You don't know everything you need to know. Slow down. And that can be really, a challenging relationship to navigate. But for students, when you're thinking back or you're thinking forward to where you're going to be in this process, the junior or the advanced, the split there is when you have the confidence to do the work that you're doing. So depending on the volume of the center you're in, you will have gotten some assists in the beginning. You get some assists, usually 2 to 10 in the junior section, and then you move right into primary under supervision. So what are the 3 things? So a lot of you, if you're looking for an apprenticeship, you're in this junior/advanced, and we smush them together, but it's the same category. You're in this category of midwifery. And what are the preceptors out there looking for when they look for adding a junior apprentice to their practice? Well, let's talk about it for a second. They're really looking for someone that can add value to their practice. And I know that sounds weird because there's a lot of preceptor abuse in the workplace. There's a lot of lack of clear expectations. There's a lot of resentment. There's a lot of racism. There's a lot of bias. And so I'm certainly not talking about the lack of integrity that exists in the midwifery community right now. But if you are working with a midwife who has high integrity, high standards, and is actually appropriate, there's no reason for them to spend as much time as it takes to teaching and supporting a midwifery student unless it adds value to their life. There are very few people out there who volunteer for 18 months without any return on that investment of time, and in a lot of ways, resources. So it's not unfair to imagine that you give something back, because it is significant. And even if you're in a school and they're paying the student's preceptor, I mean, we're talking like $18 a prenatal or less, like $40 a birth. Like, it's not actually income that reimburses the time investment. So it has to be reciprocal. And I say that word a lot. All that means is that, tit for tat. It has to be not necessarily equal, because there's no such thing really as equality, but there has to be a level of equanimity in that my needs are met in the same way your needs are met, even though they're met with really different things and different quantities, and they can't really be matched up. Our feeling is that our needs are being met, and we feel really good being together. And this is true of every relationship, you guys. This is true of your partnerships with your spouses. This is actually true of the parent-child relationship too. It's true of teachers everywhere. And so we got to see the preceptor as the teacher. And this teacher is giving a tremendous amount to you, really. And so we need to make sure that it's reciprocal. So one of the things that they're looking for is that you can add value to their practice. And this could be any number of things. Maybe it's a skill that you bring from your previous work life. Maybe it's a love and a passion and a commitment to research and top-notch care. Maybe it's just the kind of kindness and relationship where you go out of your way to make her feel special and supported. Maybe you have a certain way about you that calms people. Maybe you're willing to sit the desk and answer phones. Maybe you have a skill in billing or bookkeeping. The list could go on and on. But the point is that when you write your documents to apply for a junior position, you will try to emphasize the value that you will bring to that midwife. And a lot of students are younger than their preceptors. So younger students, you have a lot of value to bring because you have an automatic leg up in some of the pain points that they experience, primarily social media, marketing, digital web presence, and all of those things. So if you have those skills, don't hesitate to focus on them. The second thing that midwives are looking for when they hire a junior student is they're really looking for safety, demonstrated safety. So at this point, if you're looking for a preceptorship, you should absolutely have current CPR registration. You should have current NRP registration. And then you should have already attended other workshops or trainings that move your clinical thinking brain forward. This is not doula workshops. This is not sacred pregnancy fluff. This is like real clinical education. And it does not have to come from a midwifery source. There are actually very few clinical midwifery community-based trainings. You guys know I teach some of those, and there's really only a few other preceptors, teachers out there that are teaching clinical-based, community-based info. So take trainings in the medical world because it helps you make a sense of the two worlds, and it honestly helps you balance your thinking, your training, your information. It helps you. So there's some online course options out there. PESI International, PESI is a great option that is all distance-based. It's just you watch the video and take the little quizzes at the end. And they have them on gestational diabetes, and they have them on GBS, and they have them on fetal monitoring. And, the list is endless. And the point is you're putting information in your head and you can demonstrate it. In your CV, I even recommend having a running list of what you're reading, of what workshops you're attending. And this helps your midwife see that you are absolutely committed to safety. And one of the sort of side benefits you can bring her is more evidence-based research. When you're running a busy practice and you have, 3 to 6 clients due every month and a family and all the other stresses that most midwives have, you don't really have time to do a ton of research, and you don't have time to look at a bunch of the new data coming out. So that's something that you can offer your senior midwife. The third thing that midwives are looking for is that you understand the process that you're in. So demonstrate where you are in the PEP process. Demonstrate how long until you graduate. Demonstrate all manner of you understanding the process that you're in. There's nothing more frustrating to a senior midwife than having a student come and say, oh, I don't know, I just, someday I'd love to be a midwife. That just doesn't cut it anymore. I know that that was the way you got an apprenticeship in the 1970s maybe, but we just really need a lot more clear education, clear intention, clear steps. So honestly, that's why I created this student midwifery handbook that I'm going to share with you at the end of this presentation, is because there's just a lot of lack of clarity out there in the midwifery world for students. There's no student lobbyist organization. There's no student advocacy organization. And the only way students are getting information about how to do this is from each other or from, you know, the apprenticeship that they stumble into. And I'd like to create a lot more of a structured way. So that's why I made that. If you start to think about equipment, that's exciting. That means that you're really, really on your way now. But I really would caution you to spend a lot of money on equipment. It's really not fair for your preceptor to require you to have your own equipment. So you should be provided with everything that you're using within that practice by the midwife. Even things she wants you to carry for emergencies, she should provide that. They should provide that. But when you get ready to start buying your first bits of equipment, a Doppler is pretty high on my list. Certainly, I love fetoscopes and recommend learning how to use a fetoscope as well. But the truth of the matter is that it is very, very hard to get an active laboring person to lay down and be quiet enough so that you can actually make a good assessment of their baby's well-being in labor. And so for that reason, there really isn't any way to effectively do fetal heart rate assessments in labor without a Doppler. So a Doppler is what you're going to be hearing. So that's a good place to practice. So a Doppler is a great first purchase for a student. Does it have to be an expensive one? It really doesn't, to be honest. As you get more experience and you understand the purpose of the different megahertz classifications of Dopplers, you'll make a more informed choice. But just on a very general basis, the lower the number, so like a 1 megahertz Doppler, is listening in a more shallow area. And the higher the number, the deeper the listen. I mean, this is very, very generic and very simplistic. But so if you're looking and you're shopping on eBay or something for a Doppler, a 1 megahertz Doppler will really only hear a fairly thin term woman's baby efficiently. It's hard to hear posterior babies on a 1 megahertz, and it's hard to hear through an apron of a lot of maternal adipose tissue. The 3 megahertz, it's actually also hard to hear that term baby because the Doppler's listening too deep, but 3 megahertz is what you need to hear 9, 10, 11 week fetal heart tones when you're very early. So that's why many midwives end up having several different Dopplers. Most end up, you know, hanging out the 2 or 2.5 megahertz Dopplers like all the time. But it really doesn't matter because if you can pick up a good fetal heart tone, then you can do what your brain is supposed to do, which is practice counting, memorizing the actual feel and rhythm, and more than that, really comparing the count over time to the experience that the person is having at the time, whether they're in labor or not. And again, I'm doing a whole fetal heart tone assessment workshop coming up in the fall. It's a very extensive topic, but in the meantime, a Doppler is a great first purchase. Another great first purchase is anything to do with listening. So fetoscope, stethoscope, newborn stethoscope, because that is one of the harder skills to develop. So if your family wants to give you a Christmas present focused on midwifery, ask for a really good quality stethoscope. Ask for a really good quality neonatal stethoscope. Start listening to babies. You can flip the bell over and listen even to bellies with that a lot of times, and really learn more about what it is that you're hearing. And then lastly, what other equipment do we want you to buy? I don't personally want you to buy anything till you're ready to open your practice. But there's any number of other things that might make sense for you. I don't think you should be buying, let me put it this way. I don't think you should be buying instruments as a student, because I always like to think first thought, worst thought. And if there was a worst thought scenario where there was a poor outcome and, you know, you were included in that lawsuit or in that inquiry, you wouldn't want there ever to be hearsay that, oh, that equipment was the student's, because that sheds light on the idea that you would be practicing on your own or without supervision, which would put you more at risk liability wise. So my third one is really what not to buy is don't buy instruments until you're ready to open your own practice. Everything you need should be provided by your senior midwife. Alrighty, the big question that everybody is debating is, should you expect payment, and why or why not? And this is a really complex question, but I'm going to answer it from the framework of the midwifery apprenticeship process that currently exists in the US. This is not what I hope we will evolve to, but this is what currently exists. What currently exists is that the midwife essentially donates her time and her practice and her equipment and her time with her patients as she allows you to be involved in her practice. So that is actually a huge gift, product. And then if they also add teaching time and education, that's even more, right? So it's a huge amount of a product that you're receiving. And so there is some move to have students pay midwives. And then that's, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to dive into different pathways of political drama, but essentially that gift, that work, that product that you are receiving from your senior preceptor should be paid back, but it should be reciprocal. Here's this word again. You are also giving your time and energy and taking on other roles within her practice besides just being her shadow, hopefully, if you're doing it right. That means that you're answering the phone, and as you learn how to, you're filing ultrasound records and lab reports and making reminder calls or return calls, phone calls about a lending library. You're taking on duties of laundry or autoclave or all manner of other little details that it takes to run a practice, as well as being hands-on support and taking on some of the doula role and just generally adding the beauty of midwifery back to her practice. And that is a huge time commitment and a gift. And so I really just want to encourage, given the current system that we're in, that midwives and preceptors are reciprocally supporting each other. It should feel fair and it should be balanced. And it should feel like you're both offering value to each other. If that stops being the case, if you feel like value's not being delivered, we actually have a bigger breakdown of problems. And so then we need to really have a regular check-in. And so I recommend this anyway. I recommend that whether you're in a NARM process or a school process, that you have quarterly check-ins and that they not be fluff or just pass by, that they be really like dyed in the wool, a required appointment, neither of you cancels unless there's an absolute emergency, and that you schedule at least an hour to have a face-to-face with no distractions to go through how is it going for you. And you both ask each other the same question. And then you go through strengths, weaknesses, how you can support the relationship, what the process is, So there's a whole process for that. But in the meantime, I highly recommend that you have regular check-ins. Somebody is asking me, what happens if you bring clients into the practice and no teaching time is being offered outside of the birth attendance? Yeah, this is when it gets really, really messy and complicated. So the way I always worked it is that if if I knew that this person interviewing our practice was here because of this student, then that student would get to play a much bigger role in that client's healthcare than if they were someone that was just a stranger off the street. So I kind of like, if they were a junior student, I would automatically advance them to primary under supervision to give them that gift of extra experience and moving their skill forward while they were under supervision with a client that already knew and wanted them. That's why they're there. Another way that I know some practices have done it is they've done finder fees. So anyone that's associated with the practice, the gal that comes in and cleans in the evenings, or your bookkeeper, or anyone that's associated with the practice, they would get $100 finder's fees. So if somebody called to make an appointment at the office, the question from whoever was answering the phone is, how did you hear about us? And if they name someone's specific name, that person got a check. So that's one way to handle it. But I think once you start mixing this education piece with business, it gets really, really complicated. So my rule has always been, and it's what I recommend to other preceptors, is if you are still signing a skill for that student, that is the payment. But if they have completed all of the skills, they're ready for money. And so what that looks like is as we move forward into the graduate level apprenticeship, which we're going to get into in just a second, if they if they're just doing their last 2 continuities and they need 4 well womans, they're done with prenatals, they're done with newborns, they're done with postpartums, they're done with assists, they're done with all those other levels of training. And so if you're asking them to do assist births with you, or you're asking them to cover a prenatal for you, they should get paid. So that's kind of how I feel. That's what's in the handbook. Hopefully that helped answer your question. Jacqueline, as for your question of like looking for a preceptor, it feels to me like there are a lot of preceptors that don't really understand their role. And that's not for you to fix, but it is for you to clearly describe your expectations. So in that application packet, you identify some midwives that you might want to see, you might want to work with, and you put together your CV, put together your cover letter, get in for an interview, and then you need to ask the questions that you really need to know in order to see if this is a good fit. So being duped certainly is a responsibility of the preceptors not being clear with what they want and what they're offering and how long you have to work and all those things. But also you have to take a little responsibility. It's also a bit about you. And there are so many midwives that, the students, they enter the student world kind of like with their head bowed, being like, hi, can I please come with you? Can I please have some experience? And that really meek and mild and shrinking to fit, and like that, I mean, it's like humility that's gone too far. It's gone to this place of actually less than. That place of begging for an apprenticeship is really dangerous, because it sets up actually a codependent relationship where we have like somebody who's got total authority and someone who's just a subservient. And, I really hate that for midwives. I see it actually more often than I'd like. So I give this advice to midwives, and I give this advice to students. We really need to stop sneaking in the back door, and we need to walk through the front of the house like we own the house. And that is a mental shift. That's a mindset shift, that you deserve to be here. You deserve this education. You are worthy of the time and attention it takes to move through this. And, when it's a midwife, if they keep this philosophy from their student world, then they come on in and they're like, please, insurance company, please pay me. And we can all see how ridiculous that is. It doesn't work. You have to walk through the front door like you own the house and say, excuse me, I am absolutely qualified to receive reimbursement for this properly qualified healthcare, you have to believe in yourself in a way that allows you to advocate for yourself. And midwifery students are no different. You have to believe in yourself so that you can advocate for yourself. So I got a big question here from one of our viewees. At what point do I pressure my preceptors to sign my COC clients? I caught my first baby 18 months ago. Wow, cool. And I caught a total of 24 babies and have been a birth worker for 7 years and attended hundreds of births. She's mentioned it several times, but I also think she's afraid of my leaving since I do so much work. It's a busy practice with 6 to 10 births a month. The senior above me is burned out and left, and I'm getting burnout. I'm the senior apprentice. I've attended at least 35 births this year already. I'm done with skills except suturing and my IV course. So this is basically exactly what I'm talking about. You have overstayed, and this is equally as much responsibility of the preceptor as it is of you. You know, they should have been like, we are finished. You showed me that we're finished. I see on my charts that you're finished. Here's the signatures. I really need you to stay because I don't have another student to take your place. So now I need to pay you. So that is a real challenge. And I'm sorry, so sorry that you have been used and abused in such a way that now you feel burnout. That's the very worst way to start your midwifery career. And I'm really, really sorry. However, I will say that it is always going to end with you. You have to fix this. And so you need to sit down with your paperwork, schedule it. Don't like out of the blue, like, you know, spring it on your preceptor, but schedule an appointment and be really political, unprofessional about this and say, here's all my documented paperwork. Sign all of this. Now let's go to the bank and sign with the notary. And now I'm mailing it in. And then the very next day, don't get these out of order or that's where relationships blow up. But the very next day, then you say, so now that I'm finished, I would like to be paid for my time and work. Or I would like to move on. And this takes a lot of belief in yourself and a lot of gumption. But hundreds of births is way beyond the protocol of a student. It has been estimated that from the International Confederation of Midwives that an appropriate internationally approved training program offers 100 births to graduation. So your goal is about 100. The NARM process, I think, is about 75. The CNM process is even less than that. I think it's only 20. But then they're expected to work under supervision with their first job in the hospital and get about 100. So 100 is the goal, and you've gone way beyond that, which means that you are now way beyond an advanced midwifery student. You are a junior midwife, ready to practice. Suturing, you know, I didn't believe this myself, but when I came here to Australia, I got asked to teach a couple of suturing classes here by the local midwives. And I was kind of like, well, I'm great at suturing, but you guys work in the hospital. What do you need this for? And they explained to me that suturing and IVs are not a part of the core curriculum for the hospital-based midwives here. So they're supposed to learn suturing on their own by watching doctors in the hospital. And then they can get signed off on it as an actual employee and go ahead and practice. So suturing actually, it's a great skill. You reduce transports that way, and you definitely will increase your patient satisfaction because they get to stay home. But suturing is actually not necessary to graduate on your own. And I feel the same way about IVs. Great skill, will wonderfully move you forward in reducing transports and keeping people happier and healthier, but not necessary to be a fully fledged midwife. And in fact, if you go back just a few years or into a few other different states, you'll see that that is still not required. IV skills and suturing are actually not required, even in the NARM process. So you need to know what it is and you need to know how to do it, but you don't need to be an expert. So take those classes and just move on, and then present the process to your preceptor. If you are thinking to start your own practice, because it seems like you're ready with 7 years and hundreds of births, check out the new course that I just released, How to Start a Midwifery Business Right. And that's on my website. Alrighty, let's see. Jacqueline, hopefully I answered your question. So I need to hire you to wrap this up. Yep, I'm happy to consult. I'm happy to move you through it. So Jacqueline, yeah, hopefully that helped you to feel that you can clearly slate what it is that you need in your apprenticeship with a preceptor, and be able to start the next apprenticeship off on the right foot. Alrighty, so now we move to the senior or graduate level apprentice, and this apprenticeship is much shorter, 3 to 9 months, depending on what numbers you're finishing up. And whoever was messaging me before that, this is the level that you're in. And it can really be a burnout at this point. You have been doing this for at least 3 years, maybe 7, like you were saying, a lot or almost all of that without payment, long hours, grueling schedule, huge amount of information to assemble in your brain. And it is exhausting, y'all. It's exhausting, and then not getting paid for it is even more exhausting. So how do you know you're in burnout? There's just one simple test. And if the preceptor or the client phone calls make your heart drop, you're in burnout. If they make you giddy and excited, you're not. So you remember that first few phone calls you got? Oh, someone's in labor, it's time to come. And you just basically floated out the door, whistling a tune. That's where we want to get you back to. If your heart drops, if you throw the phone, you're definitely in burnout. So that is not an ideal state to live in. And we want to do everything we can to get you out of that state. So part of it is going to have to be unpacking your resentment. Resentment at being taken for granted, resentment for being used. And then you're going to have some personal resentment for not standing up for yourself, for not demanding what you know is true and what you need. So if you need to, seek some counseling. There's even some online counseling places that are great right now to unpack this place. Certainly, I'm happy to consult with students at any time for any issue. I do offer a 20-minute free consult just to see if we're good to work together first. And the first thing is to really solve this, like being honest and true to yourself. Like betraying yourself is one of the best ways to hate the situation you're in. And there are so many midwives that are being asked to betray themselves, to continue working without reimbursement, without acknowledgement, way beyond when they should be. So that is shitty. And I wish preceptors did a better job. I'm holding a workshop tomorrow for that. You can send your preceptors to that. But also, it also is a two-way street. So it also requires you. It requires you to focus on your needs and your worth and demand that. So get out of burnout as fast as you can. So what happens if you, after a traumatic birth? This is a really common question. This has been, actually, I have a question now. Do these times include academic learning? I think they do, honestly. I think they do. I think that you can move through this process in 3 years. The 3 to 9 month additional bit, I'm going to describe why that is. I've added that, but yeah, you can finish your midwifery apprenticeship in just 3 years. So yeah, I think you can study. I think you can experience. I think you can assimilate, and I think you can be ready in 3 years. Some people can do it in 2. That's the very fastest I've ever seen that really be effective. And in fact, that's NARM's minimum now. You can't go from your first birth to your last birth in less than 2 years. And some people do it in 5. And I think that's fine too. If you're at a more part-time phase, if you have small people at home, 5 years is also possible. But the numbers would be the same. You just dragged out the time. You shouldn't work for free for 5 years. Okay, so what about a traumatic birth? This is one of the things I get probably the most calls about. A midwife or a student are trying to process their emotions, protect themselves legally, and then get back into it. And yeah, I mean, my gosh, people have heard me say this before, but pardon me, it bears repeating, midwifery is the hardest job on the planet. So yeah, it's super hard. And you're walking the threshold. You're right on the line between life and death, whether you acknowledge it or not. Every situation, every birth, you are absolutely right there. And experiencing a traumatic birth is not an if, it's a when. Whether it's traumatic because of the process, the outcome, the relationship dynamics, the interface with the hospital world, the EMS, or the patient's response, there's going to be trauma. So the most important thing after you experience a traumatic birth is to take care of yourself. And I know this goes counterintuitive to what most midwives do or hear. They rush off to take care of the patient. Certainly, this is after the traumatic moment. In the trauma, get the patient to the right care. Don't take care of yourself. In the trauma, be the midwife. But when you leave the hospital or you leave the home, and either they're stable or they're being cared for by other people, then the shift is to take care of yourself. And I can't stress this enough. Like there's probably no better way to ensure the demise of midwifery than to continue to burn the candle at both ends and burn yourself out. We have a real crisis in midwifery. If you stop and look around at the various preceptors and educators out there in midwifery, we have a real crisis, y'all. There is, a divorce epidemic. There's a diabetes and obesity epidemic in midwifery. And there is a huge amount of senior preceptors who leave the profession. And this is due to burnout, exhaustion, and trauma. And so a lot of people don't know this, but being a midwife in the US in the community setting is traumatic, period. And basically every single preceptor and most students are walking around with CPTSD, complex post-traumatic stress response or stress. And it's really intense. It's really intense. I don't want to underestimate it. So Layla is saying that she was told she will either lose her marriage, lose her license, or lose her mind. That is a very succinct way to sum up what I'm talking about. So the dangers of practicing midwifery in the United States is a separate conversation. And I cover that a lot in my defensive charting seminar, which is coming up in October again. But before we talk about decreasing your liability, we have to talk about increasing your self-care. And I'm not talking like spa days. I'm talking about radical self-care. And the real key to radical self-care is knowing your holy no and your sacred yes and using them appropriately. And this is like a body knowledge. This is not a head process. It's not be like, oh, I don't think I really want to do that. No, it's like you listen to that inner guidance that says no. And you say no. You don't betray yourself. You don't allow yourself to become second to anything. You can't pour from an empty cup. And this is never more important than in midwifery. So Amanda's asking, how do you advise senior students that are looking for preceptors to showcase their skills, yet not appear they are know-it-alls, especially for midwives moving into a new geographic location? I'm finished with everything but my last 10 births and must be done stateside as some of them are COCs. Yet many preceptors have big things to say. We don't take primary students initially. Yeah, and that's their loss. I'm sorry, that's shitty. I wish that were different. You're gonna have to hunt high and low for a preceptor that has done the internal work, that they don't see you as a threat, that they understand that you are an incredible asset. So look for those kinds of highly evolved midwives that get that bringing a senior student in will help them immensely. They have to do less work. You're ready to run all the prenatals and the postpartums and go do lactation checkups, and you're ready to do all of that. So actually it helps them tremendously. So you just have to write your application in such a way that you demonstrate the value you're going to add to their practice, while at the same time being humble and focused on safety and skills. And of course, there are going to be some that say no because they're threatened by you, and that's their loss. Keep looking. I'm sure you'll find a good fit. There are many midwives that want exactly what you have to offer. And if you're looking in the next couple months, let me know. I have three preceptors that are looking for senior midwives, senior students right now. So let me know. So what do you do after a traumatic birth? First thing is you take care of yourself. What does that look like? Most of the time, it looks like saying no. Nope, nope, and no. No, thank you. Not interested. Sorry, I can't. Today's not a good day. I'll have to call you back. No, thank you. Like over and over and over and over and over and over. Because if you spread yourself too thin, if you exhaust yourself, there is no way to recover. And I'm not kidding. I'm really not kidding. Adrenal fatigue is real. It's a physical occurrence. So after a traumatic birth, the first thing is just to sit with yourself and take care of yourself, which means no birthday parties and no like driving your kids to the mall. And like, you just have to get rigid and just militant about saying no to anything that does not fill your cup. That's why you have grandmas and partners and other people to help out. And your kids can honestly find something else to do. They don't need to have you constantly at their beck and call. Your clients can have backup assistants, take care of their problems. And you do need to make sure that your practice can still run. So you do need to call in backups or call in midwives or, whatever. But saying no to what does not fill your cup is one of the most important first things. Then very quickly after you begin the no process and you get some of your time back for yourself, then you've got to use that time to protect yourself. So first thing is self-care, and second thing is protection. So if you haven't taken my charting class yet, and you're about to be a new midwife, highly recommend that you do that. If you're a student, you got to make sure that you're not signing the chart. So this should be instructed to you by your preceptor, but in case you never got this message, students don't sign charts ever. Otherwise, you're taking legal responsibility for the outcome of that chart. So don't put your name on any charts. It is okay for your midwife to record that you attended as a student in a certain student capacity, but you don't put your signature. You don't have the way to authenticate charts. You don't take any responsibility for documenting or recording events. You can certainly be asked to record some things, but not with your name. The midwife will always come along later and add their initials and add their names. So as a student, don't sign charts. And if you've been to a traumatic birth with a bad outcome, you also need to not speak to the client. And I know that this is very controversial and emotional, but you endanger that midwife's liability and you endanger your own. So even if they call you and even if they text you, the legal advice that I get from the midwives and lawyers that I work with is not to engage. You can reply by simply saying, I think your question would be better answered by your midwife, or I want to direct you to talk to the midwife in these difficult times. That's it. That's all you can say. I'm not the appropriate one to answer this question. Please contact Sally, or whatever it is. I don't know, whatever your midwife's name is. The point is, don't take responsibility. Even if you were the senior midwife, even if you were the primary under supervision, catching that baby, don't take responsibility after a poor outcome if you were not the one legally responsible. So after you have said no to a lot of things and done things that fill your cup and protect yourself, then the next bit is to really try to get clear with your midwife. What happened? So it's not a peer review. Do not go to peer review on this unless you live in a state with a legally protected peer review. Don't peer review bad outcomes. I know this is also controversial, but unless you work and live in a state that has legally protected peer review, where the people listening to your peer review can't be subpoenaed to testify against you, that's not a safe place to peer review. But with the other people at the birth, your midwife and any other students or assistants, you should, as soon after the birth as possible, get together and talk through the process. And this has two benefits. One is that you're going to learn a lot by reviewing the chart, reviewing the memories and the occurrences and asking questions and getting deep into it. But also it means that you're all on the same page, so that if you do end up all being subpoenaed to testify with and for and against each other, you're saying the same thing. The chart is accurate. Everyone's on the same page. The bottom line is, don't isolate from everyone. Just isolate from the bullshit BS that's out there. So, you know, say no to everything that doesn't fill your cup, protect yourself legally, and then get clear with your senior midwife. Okay, questions about that, feel free to ask. I know it's a big topic. If you need to consult after a traumatic birth, you are welcome to call me. I do not bill right away. I will deal with that another day. The important thing is that you can call right away and get in with me. I answer Facebook messages just as quickly as I answer texts. So if you have something you need to process, feel free. And it is totally confidential. So what if you get fired before you finish your numbers? We've had a couple questions alluding to this. Well, first of all, I hate that term, and I wish we could stop using the word fired. You're not an employee. There's no firing. What if the relationship does not sustain the end of your apprenticeship? Is really the way it looks. And it's always mutual. I mean, there's certainly some crazy people in every profession. There's some crazy people in midwifery, and you might have drawn a short straw and gotten a crazy midwife preceptor. But the bottom line is, you knew it was going bad before it went really bad. We all know that. You know when there's awkwardness and tension and it's inappropriate kind of communication or inappropriate asks. You know that you need to leave way before the relationship blows up. So listen, leave. Like, seriously, you all. Like, if you can feel it burning in your heart that this is shit and you're being treated like shit and it's not in your best interest, leave. Now, don't do it in a big huffy way and don't blow up the relationship. But as soon as you feel that there's tension, bring it to your quarterly review meeting with your senior midwife, or schedule an additional meeting and say, I'm feeling really like this isn't working out. I don't feel like I'm meeting your needs, and I certainly don't feel like my needs are met. That's a really non-confrontational way to bring it up. Sometimes you'll get this, oh God, no, not at all. We love you. We want you to stay. What's happening? What can we do better? That's the ideal response. And if you get that, fantastic. Come prepared with a list of things that you need to have different, like better communication, or like written requests, or, you know, whatever it is that is going to make the relationship better. But if the response is, no, we feel like be like, okay, well, thank you so much. Here's the paperwork to sign. Hopefully you already have it signed, but definitely get the last bit of paperwork signed from your midwife. And then part ways. And if it doesn't resolve in that meeting that you're going to part ways, but you leave and you really feel like it is best if you go, send a letter. Send a heartfelt, kind, loving, graceful letter that says, thank you so much for the opportunity. I learned X, Y, and Z. I can't wait to continue our relationship as friends. I will always speak positively about you in the community, and I appreciate the opportunity for you to speak positively about me as I continue my education. And if you end relationships on those kinds of positive, kind, gratitude-focused notes, it really doesn't get ugly. Someone's asking, do you advise students not to be friends with their preceptor? This is a funny one. It's a great question, but it's a funny question, right? There's really no way not to be, y'all. I mean, there's no way not to be. You're shoulder to shoulder in the trenches in like bloody battles. Like you are going to be friends with them. I mean, handle your first hemorrhage with anyone. You're going to be friends with them. If you have a like it's called trauma bonding, actually. Like if you come across a massive car accident and you're the first one on the scene, whoever else is helping you is your best friend for life. The same is true of midwifery. Like if somebody is helping you, they're like, you're bonded forever. So you can't not be friends with them. Now there's a difference between friends, collegial connection, heart connection, like soul connection, because you're standing on the threshold of life and death. There's a difference between that and oversharing, overburdening, dysfunctional kind of communication relationship. So there's definitely a line. I want everyone to focus on professionalism, and I want everyone to focus on really what you're there to do, which is not to be friends, but actually to move the client's health and safety forward. But certainly you're going to be friends for sure. So what if you get let go, which wasn't your choice? Not that you're finishing the relationship, but your preceptor is. My best advice here is always take the high road. Just always take the high road. It can't hurt, and it oftentimes helps. So no matter what they say, stay in gratitude, stay in appreciation, and leave gracefully. And my biggest advice is you can only do that if you don't let it get so bad. So honestly, most midwives won't be fired. Students won't be being let go from positions because they'll be choosing to move on. If you can see that the personality schism, the growth is not going to keep happening, then you will take yourself out. And so what I wish more students and midwives knew is that all three of these levels, and even at the advanced, it's really junior and advanced, there's kind of like 4 levels of midwifery. You could do each one of them with different preceptor. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean you failed in any way. And in fact, you're probably going to be a better midwife for having had more experience and more influence. So it is perfectly appropriate to begin your apprenticeship saying, this is a beginning level apprenticeship that ends in 18 months. This is an advanced level apprenticeship that ends in 9 months. Like it's perfectly fine for you to define the term, define the process when you start. And in fact, I encourage you to have that in your contract, and a sample contract is in the book I created. And then you just move on. And I know that people think there's not enough midwives, but there is. There really is. There is enough reasons. There's enough movement. And I also, in tomorrow's presentation, I'm going to be presenting the idea that preceptors can really have way more than one student at a time, because you can absolutely sign a beginning and a junior or graduate level signatures at the same birth. So there's no reason we shouldn't be using that more often. Alrighty, so I had a couple questions that I got on email that I wanted to answer. Somebody that was afraid that they were going to miss the course and wanted me to answer them online. So let me just pull that up really quickly. And if anyone else has any questions that they want to ask, feel free. Let's see. Oh yeah, there's so many great questions here. People have just been doing such a great job thinking through this process and thinking about how they'd be served best. And oh my gosh, so awesome. Okay. I'm finding it really quickly. There it is. Okay. So this person had some questions about having more than one midwife. And I think, yes, you absolutely can have more than one preceptor and you can have more than one student. And so I just highly, highly encourage that. And if your midwife hasn't ever thought of that, propose it. Ideally, the safe number of attendees at a birth is 3 or 4. At the end of the day, there's 2 patients, and you need to have enough hands and skill and record keeping to make it safe. And so really, honestly, you can have, a junior student, you can have a beginning student, and you can have a graduate level student. Now, you can't sign like, there can't be two people in the graduate level. There can't be two people catching or being primary at the same time. But all the other roles still need to get filled at a birth. And you can sign the same birth for those different levels of students. So absolutely. And then let's see. There was another question here. Yeah. So how do I bridge the gap between what I know and what I need to know? Ooh, such a good question. Well, hopefully it's your preceptor who's leading you on that. Hopefully you've read the recommended reading list. I have that very extensive recommended reading list in the books that I'm going to share with you. And hopefully that you can really quiz your midwife. Like, it takes sitting with your midwife to understand more and more and more about what it is that they're doing. And that takes time. And that's where I say that this 3 to 3.5 year time frame is what is normal and expected. So hopefully that answers that. Megan has a question here. I just started with a preceptor and she has lost 2 apprentices since I started just a couple of weeks ago. She's incredibly upset and frustrated since they were all very experienced apprentices and she really needed them at birth. I worry that when I will get to the point that I want to apprentice with someone else potentially, and how do I approach this? Yeah, so it can be really frustrating. We always want to give lots of notice. And this is why I say starting your apprenticeship with the expectation that there's only so much, that there's only that the time frame is defined. So using this guide of 18, 18, and 3 to 9, you could come and say, this is the level student I am, and this is the time frame I'm going to commit to your practice. And in your contract, right at the beginning, that's what you work out. So that can make it so much clearer instead of people just leaving and emotions and relationships blowing up, et cetera, et cetera. And Megan, having lost 2 apprentices, you're in a position to take on a lot of work, which is great. You'll learn a lot faster. But if you want to apprentice with someone else, potentially, just be upfront and honest about that. Start to be clear and say, I really want to work with so-and-so. If your midwife is uncomfortable with you working with other midwives, it's actually a sign that that midwife probably is not going to be a great preceptor for you, because that's really uncomfortable to think that they're going to hamper your development. It's like a really egotistical thing. I encourage students to work with as many preceptors as possible. Now, that being said, it's not logistical for a student to work with more than one midwife at the same time, lots of times, because you can't be on call for 2 practices and actually guarantee that you're available. So that makes you unavailable and unreliable, and we don't want that. But when you're ready to move on and practice with somebody else, you just give notice. You say, in 30 days, I'm moving on. Here's my 30-day notice. And even more than that, you just come to the end of the contract that you had already written, and then you move on. Lori's asking if she can register for the preceptor webinar. Absolutely. It's totally free. It's available for everyone. It's on my social media and website. Feel free. So Jacqueline is asking, how do you find midwives looking for students? I want to move out of the area, but I just don't know how to find them. Yeah, it's a real problem. I've been a connector for a lot, so I do know of a number of open positions around the country right now. And if you want me to connect you with some, I will. There is a student and preceptor job Facebook page some people post on. I've been investigating putting together a kind of like a dating app matching preceptors and students. So we'll see. It's, you know, money and time is the big challenger. Wendy's saying NARM actually recommends that you have more than one preceptor. Absolutely they do, because we all know that it's better. So what if the midwife you work with won't take more than one student at a time because the family doesn't want very many people at a birth? What are your thoughts on this? Well, Wendy, that's a great question. And I kind of have a bigger thought process, and that's really 2 things. Number one is it's really not safe to not have the minimum number of people you need to do a birth safely. So the bottom line is that there are 2 patients, right? So there's mom and baby. And if you're doing, twins, then there's 3, but there's 2 patients at the very minimum, the birthing person and the baby. And if they are both having an emergency, which happens, and the only reason you think that doesn't happen is you haven't been in enough births yet, mom is hemorrhaging and baby needs resuscitation, it's actually impossible to do those 2 high-level emergent skills with only 2 people. It's impossible. Doing bimanual and drawing up pit, you need 2 people. Resuscitating a newborn, if you're doing chest compressions and breaths, you need 2 people. So the very, very minimum is 3 people at a birth. Then you also have to chart, and then, handing people things and clean up, and, it's just, we need more than 2 people, period. And so if your clients only think they want 2 people, they don't know what you know, which makes that relationship dangerous. You have to communicate your risks clearly and the point of you being there, or else the whole thing is dangerous. So number 1, the midwife isn't really thinking it through, because the bare minimum to do safe birth is 3 people. And then they're not preparing their clients appropriately by not being clear about the risk that the client is facing. And then more than that, it doesn't move the profession forward. So there are some midwives who don't want to professionalize, who want to still be, in the hippie realm, or they want to be in spiritual midwifery. And, there's a midwife for everyone. So I'm not going to criticize those midwives, but in terms of the profession will not move forward with that perspective. We will not be the mainstream choice for mainstream women with that idea. We will continue to be a fringe, anti-establishmentarianism, marginalized profession. And as we all know, when we look statistically, midwifery saves lives. We need to be the mainstream option to save lives. Within that mainstream option, there can be more medically oriented folks and more, spiritually oriented folks. There's a huge range there, but the whole profession as a whole needs to move towards being available for more. And the best way to do that is to have more midwives. So we as preceptors have to train more midwives, but we're going to talk about that more tomorrow. Alrighty. So another question here. What would you suggest a midwife explain to her client why 3 people are necessary to birth? So many clients only want 1 or 2 and the student gets left out. So this is a preparation process. This is simply not telling the truth. Because if you tell the truth, exactly like what I just did, if you're hemorrhaging and your baby's not breathing, who would you like me to save? Like, it's really that simple. Because EMS is 5 to 50 minutes away. The hospital is 5 to 50 minutes away, and we still have to move 2 patients out the door. How am I going to do that with 2 people? How am I going to stop your bleeding and help your baby breathe if there's only 2 of us? It's just, there's no way around it. You can't argue with this logic because it's actually true. So clients who don't want more than 1 or 2 people don't know the risk. So it's up to us to educate them. And midwives who don't clearly explain this risk are really not practicing safely. And there's no way around that. I mean, it's just the way it is. I've been a midwife for 20 years. And you guys, I think some of you know that, more than 20 years now, I think some of you know that I came into midwifery as an unassisted birthing mom. I had my 3 babies unassisted. And the beliefs and the processes that I understood to be true as a 1, 2, 3, 5-year midwife, it has evolved. And it's about simply seeing it. It doesn't mean that I'm more medical, and it doesn't mean that I don't believe in the power and the sovereignty of the birthing person. It just means that I'm more realistic. I have seen people drop from hemorrhage. I have seen babies who were perfectly fine in utero come out not breathing. And once you start to see that the world is bigger, that the processes are more, you plan appropriately. So I can tell you emphatically, the minimum safe amount of people at a community-based birth where help is at least 5 minutes away, and many times 50 minutes away, the minimum is 3. So we have to prepare our clients in such a way so that they understand what we're doing and why we're there. And we have to bring enough people. So thanks for answering and asking that question.
Lori's saying, do the app, swipe right to train with me. Yes, swipe right. That's totally it. We're in swipe culture. Alrighty, let's see. Leela's saying that she's on her way next week for a week-long preceptor shadow and interview. Ooh, I love that. What a great way to do it. Any tips for such a long interview or shadow? Soak it up. You're going to love it. Number one, don't go with nerves, go with excitement. And then when you get there, just make yourself useful. It's great to over ask. What can I do? How can I help? What can I do? How can I help? They'll give you things, or they won't. You can just sit quietly by and observe. But bring a notebook and a pen and just write questions that you have. Don't ever ask them in front of a client. But as soon as you get some spare minutes alone, start to ask questions. And that will demonstrate that you really are a self-starter and you're committed to your own education, which is what most midwives want to see. Okay, so why is it critical to celebrate your graduation? Because you all, this is so exciting and so important. When you graduate, when you get your numbers, when you pass your exam, please have a party. Make it online or in person. Post about it. Ask other people to post about it. Have people give you presents. Take graduation photos. Like, this is really exciting and really important. The statistics coming out globally show that midwives save lives, and you will be part of such an important thing. So celebrate it and have everyone else celebrate you, and it will bring midwifery into the public eye as well. Alrighty, so I have a new resource for you. Stick with me for a few minutes more. I'm going to give you a discount code at the end because you're my people. So this is a new resource. It is a 50-page full color apprentice handbook. This is what we all wish we would have gotten when we started. And it covers every single aspect of apprenticeship. The table of contents is extensive. I have several appendixes, including acronyms and the Midwifery Model of Care recommended reading list, charting shortcuts, all those things. So I'm just going to run through a few screenshots. We go through emergencies. We have a glossary of maternal organizations. Then I have a whole list of supplies, what you're ordering first and how you're using them, and charting, HIPAA. We have recommended reading books. I have my recommendations. We have NARMS discounted there. And it's available on my website, which is midwiferywisdom.com/shop. So if you have any questions about this document, please feel free to ask them. It is available now, and it is listed for $195 on my website. But that gives preceptors the ability to use any bit of it as their handbook in their office. It allows them to use the sample contract in their relationships with all of their students. But if you're a student and you're going to use this for your personal use, then I have a discount for you. So you can get a 50% discount off this. It is single use for students only. You would use the code STUDENT50 at checkout. That means that you can't share it, so please don't. This is my only source of income, is creating products for you all. So send your friends back to purchase it from me. But this discount is available here for students for single use, and it's for people who attended this workshop. So don't spread that around. It does not include protocols because this is not for midwives. This is for students, but it does include lots of details about how students will navigate their student process, and lots of steps to get the information in your head. Yeah, my absolute pleasure, Lindsay. I'm so happy to give this. I'm really interested to see how you guys like it. It's very extensive, as I said, and it's pretty, it's fully designed. There's just lots. So we're going to go back to the table of contents if you just want to review that. Again, midwiferywisdom.com/shop, and the discount code is STUDENT50. So take advantage of that if you want. It was great to visit with you all. We're at the hour and a half mark, so I think we did it. Thank you so much for joining me today and for being a part of my circle. If you want to work with me more in depth, I do have a private group on Patreon. You can either join in the clinical track, in the business track, or in both, getting both pieces of info. I offer monthly office hours so that we can chat and talk about all the things that are up for you. And also I offer special discounts and other things to things that I'm doing. So think about joining my Patreon. That's patreon.com/Augustine Colebrook. And then if you will, and you haven't yet, go follow me on YouTube. I'm almost to 1,000 subscribers, and I'm going to do a big giveaway when we get there. So youtube.com/Augustine Colebrook. Come follow me on YouTube. If you're watching this recording after the fact, that code will still work for you. So feel free to use the code. But again, it is a single use. It's for personal use. If you're going to share it with other students or use it in your practice, you need to purchase it at full price. All right, my friends, thank you, thank you, thank you. I wish you so much luck. I'm cheering for you. And as always, take as good of care of yourself as you take of your mamas. All righty. Bye, everyone. Have a great day.